So, you want to know how to toggle a keyframe on and off. It's quite simple, but to say that having to understand in logic how to toggle something on and something off. So for example, I want to do thing 1 when it's off or thing 2 when it's on. That's not as simple as it would first seem. So what I've got basically set up is a standard puppet and then 2 parts of the sculpt. That's it, just to save me doing that on camera. So my first step is obviously create some logic. So I'm just going to stick that to the item, right? And then what I should probably do is, I'll leave those ungrouped for now. I'll group them after the fact. No, actually, I'm going to group them now, just so it's an entity to start with. And by entity, I mean it's a a thing. We can create copies of it, and then any keyframes we build a kind of part of that entity. Right. So the first step is to set up the 2 states. So we already have an off state. That's how we sculpted it. So because of that, and because we're only switching between on and off, we don't have others like I don't know. You might have others if it was a different game mechanic, but because it's a door, you only have on and off. So we've got our off state. We know that that's what its default is. So we want to create its on state. So the on state, and I keep saying state, it's important because this is like programming. You have state machines. So everything's a state machine basically, but this one is just a very simple one, off and on. So let's create our on state. So all I'm going to do is, I don't really care if it's rough and ready. I'm just going to rotate it and just make sure it's kind of how I want it. So there's our on state, door nice and open. You know, you're going to struggle to get through. I could potentially rotate it a bit further, but I'm just going to have it like that. Right, so end that. So now we have off state when this has no power, and then if I simulate powering on by just selecting it, on state. You see that? Off, on. Right. So the simple way to test that in logic and see something actually working, how do I switch between off and on with logic, is just to send a power signal into it. Simple. Right. So the signals work in a keyframe from this wire going into it will have a power between 0 and 1, right? And depending on how much you send into that power, it will then it will go in between those states if you give it a weaker signal. So if I demonstrate that here, I think this slider defaults at 0 to 1. Yep. So at the minute I can toggle that open because it's either sending 0 for when it's off the button, or sending 1 when it's on. If I then have the slider, you can see that I've got a range of 0 to 1, and can you see, depending on if I send half half, as in 0.5, we've got like the door is half open. The rotation's off, but we don't really care, it's just demonstration, right? So that's how the power works, and that's important to know. That's how you can switch between states. But then the question is, how can you then toggle between states? Right, so how can I have something that the user can click that toggles between the states? Well, to start with, I won't bother doing the player interaction. I'll just do it on this logic. And all we really need for this, if you're doing it nice and simple, is a signal manipulator, right? So what happens with the signal manipulator? It takes whatever you feed into it. So let's say the button press, and then it changes it. So what we want is this file menu on the right, which has some nice features for this kind of thing. Custom remapper. So the thing to, don't worry about this graph stuff. That's confusing if you're just getting into it. But the thing to look at is this edge mode, right? So what we want to do is pick toggle output at on. Toggle output at on or off. So what we're going to do is we're going to toggle output at on, right? So anytime it receives a signal of 1, it's going to toggle the value saved, literally saved in this signal manipulator, right? So just to demonstrate and say, well, how do I know what the hell's going on the left, that will show the signal coming in. So that little bar will go fill up to the top for full signal or down to the bottom for a zero signal, right? So you can, and then, so yeah, sorry. So this is the signal coming in, that left-hand side, and then this is the signal going out. So what this chip has done to the signal is then sending out, right? So what we did, we sent in a signal of, let me reset, doink, sent, right, so I'm back to normal. So if I send in a signal of 1, donk, let's see, you can see it's receiving a 1, full signal, and it's sending back out a 1, right? So if I now turn this off, right, so there's no signal going in there. Can you see it's 0? It's empty, that black thing's gone all the way down, but you still got the full signal coming out, right? And that's because we set it to this mode. It toggles the output at on or off. So this signal manipulator is just storing that state, right? So it toggles it. So if it was off, it becomes on. If it was on, it becomes off. Toggles, like a toggle switch, right? So now if I send in a signal of 1 again by clicking this on, you're going to see that's going to go down. Doink. So it's still, because this is still on, yeah, there you go. There's that signal, full signal coming in, but we toggled it, so now there is a empty signal coming out. And it'll go back to normal. That's where we were when we started. Right, so simple as that. Literally 3-second job. Wire it in, wire it into our on-off states that we did with the keyframe, which I described at the start. Now if I were to toggle the button once, there you see it opens. Right, now let's assume I've turned it off. That would be simulating the player, isn't pressing the triangle button or something, but it's still got the signal coming out. Nice. And there you can see the door is still open because we've got that toggled state stored in there. Right, let's say assume the player presses the button again to interact with the door. Donk. Again, it toggles, and then the signal coming out is off. So what that means is we've literally just created a door which you can come up to and press on and off. But the question is then how do you actually have that interact with the player? So let's just assume we're going to use the standard puppet, nothing else. You've got your controller logic within the puppet. You could just wire in something from a button pressing here. So let's go and wire in, what do we want? X, why not? X is going to go and wire into that. So now that, when we possess, we should be able to open the door on and off. Now if I were to play that, oops, I've got cables, so excuse me. Play it. So I walk up to the door, press X. It probably should have been something other than X, but press X. You can see I'm toggling and go through, close it again. So that's the first step. We have done the opening and the closing, but then how do we make it so you can only do it when you're in the zone? Well, it's simple again. But before I do that, I'm just going to change the button to a circle. So when you press circle, it's going to toggle that. Right. Cool. Right, so then how do you do it when you're only in the zone? Well, you create a zone. Quite easy. Create a zone. Let's put it along with the door logic. I mean, that's reasonable. Probably, well, let's make it nice. Whatever zone we want, there you go. That's the zone we can go in. Probably should make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, that's the zone you have to be in order to open that door, right? So then we need to detect something or other. What are we going to detect? So I think, I don't use the character puppets much, but they have a tag, don't they? So I think it's probably in controller logic, is it? There's a tag somewhere. Possessed puppet. Right, so that's a tag. So we just need to search for possessed puppet. Right, so when the possessed puppet and there's one of them in the zone, we're triggering. We're doing something, right? So now we have two options. We could either do something like this. Let's do an and. So what this means is, right, remember that whole thing about signals? We want this basically to output 1, to go into here, and that's our trigger, right? But we're trying to say we only want to be able to trigger the door when we've got circle. We know we've already got that working. Can you see there's that cable wire plugged into the circle button? But the minute that would open all the doors in the scene at the same time. So we need to go, have I pressed it, and am I in the zone? So let's just do it that way, right? So the first one, so there we go. Am I pressing circle? There's that wire. And also, am I in the zone? And then that's now going to trigger. It's only going to trigger if that possessed puppet's in the zone, and if you pressed circle. So if I were to play that now, let's play you and rewind, possess you. Right, so at the minute I'm pressing circle. Oops, again I shouldn't have used circle, idiot. But whatever. That's probably gonna, let me edit that. I'll use triangle. Bloody hell. Right. Triangle. Into the... Cool. Right, now we try that. Oops. Play. Cool. So I'm pressing triangle, nothing's happening. If I come up to the door now... Whoa! Let's do it when we're not in the way. So I'm in the zone, press triangle, that opens. Pressing it again, doesn't open. Press triangle, opens, and go through. Now, there you go. That's pretty much it. So just to show you that it's working, and actually before I do that, it's not, see, you were saying you get lost, and then how do I organize stuff, basically? I think that's what you're saying. And at the minute, I don't like doing stuff like this where you're basically having wires strung all over the place. So what I tend to do, especially stuff with like input, controller input, I'll actually feed that wirelessly, right? So what we're going to do, instead of wiring that triangle button directly, we're going to have a transmitter, right? And then we're going to call it something like triangle. Triangle's pressed. The triangle button is pressed. And then we're going to open this fella up, get rid of the triangle one in a minute. Let's do that now, actually. Yep. And we're just going to wire that now into the wireless signal. So instead of that wire going all over the shop, it's now just feeding into a wireless signal. We can close that. We can come out of the puppet. We don't have to have that door attached to that player. It's general rule of thumb. If you've got something like that in a game where it's like something that you want to reuse, you don't want all those wires. But the trouble is now how we've now got this door, but there's nothing triggering it. Simple. Wireless receiver. And here's a little trick, right? Because the wireless receiver has its own zone, we don't need that AND anymore, right? So now, wireless receiver. Scale it up a bit this time so I don't go flying. Wireless receiver. Now that's going to look for signals produced by the puppet, and we're going to look for triangle. And now we feed that into the toggle. So that logic's got even simpler, right? That door, that character separate. You could have that door in a separate dream. So it's like something you can reuse in many games, or you can make copies of it. Let's, oops, there we go. Didn't mean to do that. Let's move you over here. Alright. And then there we go, got some copies. Now I should be able to independently open those doors. Right? So triangle's being pressed. I'm out of one of the zones. Walk up to them. Doop. 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 Oh, I have a logic error. What is it? Actually, that's a good point. Well, anyway, that's kind of cool, isn't it? let's go and fix that. I don't want to teach you how to make errors. And I guess this is also a good lesson. So even the open quotes, close quotes, logic pros, even they need to debug sometimes. Right, so what are we doing incorrectly? We've got triangles being pressed. Yes. Triangle being pressed. Yes, I'm pressing it. And it's sending via triangle. Yes. And then it's looking for in our door. It's receiving triangle. Yes. And we've got toggle only output on. Yes. Huh. Well, I don't know. Zone size? Well, let's see why. So we can do it in test mode. Test mode. There we go. Right. Let's possess you. Let's come up to it. Press triangle. Oh, I know why. Derp. Exit. What am I doing? Exiting test mode. Yeah, it's because I've done it wrong, haven't I? I've done the wrong thing coming out of the controller logic. I told you I don't. It's not really the kind of stuff I do. So let's get the splitter. Alright. Let's do that into there. And let's just say player 1. Assume that's going to be fine. Player 1 has pressed the button. Cool. Now let's play you. Player 1. Not doing it over here. Doing it over there. Huzzah. Cool. So I'll explain what I've actually done there. So this is part of Dreams which I think needs a bit of work, but I could just moan about that forever. There's stuff like the controller input. It needs a simpler version, right? Just like a button press widget. It's just something nice and simple where you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. But this basically, it's outputting more than just the triangle button being pressed, which is hard to quantify in your brain. Basically, like if you were just as we saw earlier, when I didn't have this wireless signal or anything like that, it kind of, and we just had that one test door which I was just standing in front of. It was just working, but what was happening is the signal actually received here wasn't just a 0 or 1. There you can see, look, coming out of it, there's always that fat wire coming out of a controller input, and that's saying it's taking multiple signals. So you can see here the triangle coming out is actually telling us loads more information than just is triangle being pressed. So I'm basically just going, I want to see if player 1 is pressing triangle. Simple. So now I'm feeding that in. You can see it's, instead of a fat wire, it's now a thin wire, and then the wireless signal is receiving the thin wire, and it all works. So now if I come back out, I reset the scene, I come in and create some copies of it. Let's do them a bit further apart. Cool, 4 copies, and I come in and press to play. Ooh. Take over my dude. Right, over here, nothing's happening. Over here, whoa, I've done it again. Open that door, open that door, open that door, and I can go through, close it. Let's leave that one open, close it. There you go.